Hi everyone, Glenn here, and I'm with Jim Decamp, a retired high school English teacher of 40 years and also combat veteran. And so we're we're talking a little bit today about the way in which the story of Harlan Warren, this Civil War veteran, has relevance to people today, right? And so as we remember, he grew up in New York. His family was a winemaking family, first winery in the state of New York, first commercial winery in the state of New York. And he volunteered for the 33rd Regiment as a musician, went off and survived a long list of Civil War battles, all the way to Appomattox. Came home, had a wife, had three children. Okay, took over the family winery and the farm, and then with some of the changes in technology and economic progress, the railroad was sited right through his farm and largely destroyed the business. And it was soon after that Harlan died by suicide. And of course, many of the sources, the newspapers at the time, had very genteel descriptions of him coming home, as if he came home sensitive, right, and things like that. But with that just sort of brief overview, um, you know, are there parts of Harlan's story that still resonate with you today in your experience?
Yeah, I think, Glenn, the comparison, which of course is difficult over 100 years, but we came from the same backgrounds. We came from the same rural, prosaic, ordinary, somewhat unexciting background. I don't know how much he had the ability to travel before, but I'm sure it wasn't as extensive as when he was in the military. I, of course, got drafted in 1970, so I was almost 25. I'd been around a little bit. I traveled in the United States a little bit, and I think I'd been abroad a few times by then. But, I was thrown into the jungle thousands of miles away from home. And he was, of course, taking this tour of the horrific battle sites of the Civil War. And so we were both taken from a really relatively safe, ordinary existence, comfortable, very comfortable, and thrown into almost an unimaginable, horrific situation. I can't contemplate it. I've told you, Dr. Wayne LaHood wrote the book, March All Night, Fight All Day. And that's what they did. And, the rude surgery, the crude surgery, and just the almost antiquated style of battle, charges and, reloading these muskets, and just the mayhem, the battlefield surgeries, and the mayhem he saw. So all those years later, for me, at 25, relatively mature for the Army, to be in the jungle in Vietnam as a mortar man was just a surreal experience for me. I was old enough where I could step back and look at it. I don't know if he could, and think, man, this is really weird, And of course, I was surrounded by young kids, 18, 19-year-old boys, young men, who were pretty good soldiers, pretty good at what they did, but had that frontal lobe insufficiency to understand that, this is life and death. And so we shared that experience. Mine was, considerably less. I was in combat for 100 days at a very propitious time in Vietnam. That we had just come out of Cambodia, and so the enemy was at a low ebb. But, I saw a couple of my battle buddies get loaded onto a helicopter in body bags, and I went to their funerals. So only about 10% of the soldiers in Vietnam were in combat. And if you get the combat infantryman's badge, the only thing you can wear above it is the Medal of Honor. So when you see these guys with their chest full of medals, the CIB, this long, is actually probably a Civil War rifle, this long rifle in a blue background is going to be the highest award they have. So it was real enough for me. And then, of course, we both came home. We both came back to the Genesee Valley. I came back in July 15th of 1971 and went back to Geneseo State to take 12 hours so I could be certified permanently. And, of course, now I'm married. I'm 26. I'm on a college campus that was belatedly getting involved in the Vietnam War. Geneseo was way behind the times of student unrest, but it was rampant, and so I was married and living on an apartment on South Street, around the corner from you on South Street, and only going to night school. The classes were at night school, and so I was fairly removed from the campus scene, but I could feel it, and I had not shaved or cut a hair on my body for a year after I got out, so I had a long beard and long hair, and I felt what he must have felt was just the rude, quick separation from what we were doing. If he ended up at Appomattox, which was a lengthy, significant battle, and then he gets back home, and then he gets to tend his business and try to get normality, and he seemed to do that with a family and children. And then the government comes in and intrudes and rips his family business apart. And now he's completely unmoored. He survived, he came back, he resurrected, he had this new path that he was going to continue his family business. And now that's taken away from him. And, I always wonder about the psychology of suicide, but it's so important, to be able to come back and have some support and some group. And, I had my family and my wife, but, I just talked to a student of mine the other day, ex-student. She didn't know I was a veteran. Nobody did. I didn't proclaim it. I didn't march in the parades. I didn't join any organizations. We came back, somewhat reviled or ignored, one or the other. That's the only two choices you were going to get. You weren't going to be honored. I think we probably kind of over-honor the Army now, but it's better than under-honoring them. So I'm not sure what reception. He came back triumphant. He came back having won and defeated a scourge of slavery. So he must have felt fairly good about what he did. But he must have been haunted by what he had seen and what he had heard. And to try to get solace and comfort back in the confines of the Genesee Valley must have been so comforting for him. And then to have that disrupted, by the forces that had sent him off to battle in the first place. So I can understand his despair. And we live in an age now where veterans kill themselves at an inordinate rate, and we have post-traumatic stress disorder, which used to be battle fatigue, which used to be shell shock, and so we've added more syllables to it. It's the same disease, and if he was seen as sensitive, loud noises probably disturbed him, and fireworks would have sent him scurrying, and he didn't like people coming up behind him, I imagine. And, I still sit, in public places where I can see things with my back to the wall, and I haven't. I've been home now. This is 54 years.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So clearly, from a historical standpoint, one of the real differences, was that the Union soldiers would have been sort of seen as victorious,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
But I could also see that in his situation of if everyone's congratulating him for doing such a good job, well, he also saw the horror that was part of that. We also know that actually his cousin, who fought for the Confederacy, died in a Union prison camp during the war, and so I think that that there must have been a lot of conflict within him of having folks congratulate him when he comes home, but knowing the horrible things that he participated in.
I love the pictures of the Grand Old Army of the Republic and the Confederacy 20, 30 years later. And they're at the battlefield at Appomattox, and they're shaking hands. And they're old men who they were lucky to survive to that age. But they were brothers literally and brothers figuratively, which must have made it harder. Our enemy, it was easy to otherize them because they were. Right. They were a different racial structure and a different size and a different ethnicity and different values and different backgrounds. So it was easy for us to make them other, whereas to have looked across the battlefield and killed your cousin or somebody who looked like you must be an extraordinary circumstance. I think World War II, we had a difference of opinion when we were fighting the Germans or we were fighting the Japanese. Equally, terrible enemies and equally guilty of horrific acts. But I probably think there was a little more empathy for the Germans than there would have been for the Japanese. We had German prisoners of war here down on Court Street in Geneseo who were treated pretty well. Yeah,
yeah. I think what you're saying sort of brings up to me is that whether we're looking at the history of a veteran from the Civil War or talking with veterans that we know today, there has to be a certain level of humility that we approach that conversation. Okay, to be able to listen and not necessarily project the other meanings, other assumptions upon this person's experience in front of us.
I used to have to caution kids if we talk to a veteran, with the school kids, really there's some questions you can't ask them. You want to say, what's it like to kill somebody or something like that. It's out of bounds, because they may know, they may not know, and if they do know, they really don't want to tell you. So I said that's something you're going to have to try to imagine yourselves, and hopefully, you think, I was thinking coming over here, policemen go through their whole career sometimes and never fire a shot. They never get shot at. But they have the daily, tension of maybe this is the day. One of our vets, Lee Weber, just retired from the Rochester Fire Department, and he fought very few fires. Mm-hmm. Most of the time they were health emergencies, and which is serious. But the big dramatic firefights, he probably was only in a few of them. Yeah. And similarly, combat is generally boredom and then terror. Yeah. And it's about 90% boredom. It's about 90% just going through the motions, moving and packing and marching, and then that 10% where it's lights out. It's the York fireworks.
Yeah. So. Yeah, exactly.
Which I just saw.
Yeah. Well, good. Thank you for these reflections, and we'll pick up a couple other questions next.
Sure.